Welcome back to The Long Lunch. It's time to continue our look back over the year with various sports. Today it's boxing, and joining us in the studio, Paul Upham, the editor of boxing website secondsout.com.au. And Paul, like all sports, it's been a big year for boxing.
Huge year for Australian boxing, but also for world boxing. Have some great fights, some great matchups, and we're going to have a look at a few of them.
We are, but before we do, some interesting news out of the recent heavyweight fight between that giant of a man, Nikolai Valuev, and of course Evander Holyfield. Now, Holyfield was aiming to become the oldest heavyweight champion of all time.
At 46.
46, but he lost the bout on points, although the WBA is reviewing it. Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of controversy. Most people, experts I consider, watched the fight and had Holyfield winning easy, 9 or 10 rounds to 3 or 2, and big controversy. Holyfield's lodged a protest, and the WBA is going to review the decision. They're going to have an esteemed panel of expert judges review it. I can tell you now, they're going to order a rematch because the WBA, the sanctioning body, only gets paid when they have a fight. So I'd say now there'll be a rematch order between Holyfield and Valuev. So maybe Holyfield at 46 and a half can become heavyweight champion. The only problem is he needs to get a neutral country. Well, they're in Switzerland, Zurich. Can you get more neutral than Switzerland?
Well, let's have a look at some of these bouts from the year, and it was very difficult for you to narrow it down to some fights to look at. Let's start with an Aussie in what may have been one of the fights of the year. Michael Katsidis, a little bit unlucky.
Look, Joel Casamaro is absolute Cuban great, and he was down twice, Katsidis, in the first round, came back and just about had Casamaro out, knocked him through the ropes at one stage. And then the Cuban great came back, and that was in the first round when Michael was down, and he went down again for a second time. And then slowly Michael got back into the fight and took control, and there you can see Casamaro going outside the ropes, which is unusual, and he came back, the Cuban great, and knocked out Michael Katsidis. But Michael's a very exciting fighter, and they love him in America.
A chance to make some big bucks, a man who's made plenty, and he's certainly arrived in America now, Joe Calzaghe. And he beat Bernard Hopkins in a fight for the ages.
When you're talking about ranked fighters this year in pound for pound, these two were number 2 and 3 at the time. So this was the highest ranking fight of the year, and it was a split decision. Joe Calzaghe going over to America for the first time, taking out the legend 43-year-old Hopkins. And look, it was a very close fight. Hopkins had Calzaghe down in the first round, and a lot of people thought this was going to be the end for Joe Calzaghe because he's never lost before, but he worked his way back into the fight. Hopkins thought he won. It was a split decision, 1 judge for Hopkins, 2 for Calzaghe, and Calzaghe got a great win.
Jeff Fenech and Azuma Nelson, 2 fighters that have seen better days, and there was plenty of controversy around about their rematch, the Hall of Famers battle. And what were your thoughts on it?
Well, for 2 old timers, 43-year-old and a 49-year-old, I thought they put a pretty good fight on. I thought it wasn't too bad. It wasn't going to be in their classic of the 2 fights we've seen before, but they were down in Melbourne, and it was a good performance. Jeff just won the fight in a split decision. Azuma put in a great performance for 49, but Jeff Fenech, the Marrickville Mauler, he just had enough to win. But let's not see too many Hall of Famers come back, because I don't think these guys at this age should be boxing in their late 40s.
I think Azuma was blowing up about the lack of funds he received after the fight, which is interesting. Jeff obviously taking the lion's share of the purse. Another Aussie that we really always keep an eye on is Anthony Mundine, for one reason or another. And some Australians love to see him win. Others like to see him get knocked to the canvas, and Crazy Kim did just that.
Well, he certainly did. A lot of people criticised Mundine this year because he didn't really have that big fight, but we saw this one here with Crazy Kim, and when Mundine did get knocked down, there was some eyebrows raised because we weren't sure if he was going to get up. But credit to Anthony Mundine, he got back up off the canvas, and he won the fight very comprehensively. You could see he was going down there and falling like a tree. At that point, I wasn't sure if Anthony was going to get up, but he showed that determination to get back up off the canvas. But we have to remember the big fight for Anthony Mundine this year was going to be the rematch with Danny Green. Of course, Danny Green retired unexpectedly at Easter, so the man hopefully gets a few more bigger fights in 2009, because we really want to see him against the best.
He does have the ability to alienate the population, doesn't he? And sometimes it works for him, because that opinion that everyone has generates the publicity. But you'd like to see that an Aussie with as much ability as Anthony Mundine has the country behind him, but it just doesn't happen.
Look, if he gets the big fights, and look, there's no doubt Anthony Mundine can beat the best out there. We saw that against Danny Green. He proved himself again in that night, that great night in Sydney. Let's see him against the best in 2009, because people do want to get behind Anthony. There's a lot of people love Anthony out there, but this year was one of his more quiet years, and we want to see him fighting in America, in Las Vegas and New York.
Yeah, absolutely. It's time for Anthony to step up to the very big stage. He sort of was the start of rugby league players turning their attention to boxing. We, of course, saw his great mate Solomon Hamono move across, and then we've seen John Hopewade move across, and in short time become the Australian heavyweight champion after he beat big bad Bob Mirovic. But there seems to be some controversy around this one as well.
Look, this was a thrilling fight. Hopewade got off to a great start, and then Bob Mirovic, the cult hero of Australian heavyweight boxing, he got back into the match. There was a lot of rough and tumble on the inside. You can see there, Hopewade looks a little bit hurt and a little bit tired. Bob seemed to be on top, and then all of a sudden Hopewade roared back into it. Now, subsequently, the Australian Boxing Federation's ordered a rematch because Big Bob, he actually fought 4 rounds with a broken forearm, which was incredible. And it was ruled that it came from some foul tactics, a push. It was a close ruling, but they've ordered a rematch. Now, Hopewade, we've heard on Fox Sports News, said he's not going to give him a rematch, so we'll have to see where it goes from here. But this was a great fight, a great heavyweight fight, a slugfest, and they put on a great night's entertainment for the fans.
How good is Hopper?
Look, let's give him his due. He needs a couple more years to build his skills. He's got great power, but he's also got fantastic hand speed for a heavyweight, and that is what will help Hopewade go a long way. But look, it took Anthony Mundine 2 or 3 years to really start developing as a fighter. Let's give John Hopewade a couple more years to see how far he can go.
And the good thing is he's not shy to punch blokes in the ring. I had to just get that out before we move on. Bernard Hopkins, the golden oldie. You saw him have that loss at the start of the year. We're talking about the oldest heavyweight at 46, but at 43...
He is a freak at 43 years of age for Hopkins to do what he did. Now, Kelly Pavlik was moving up. He was the undefeated middleweight champion in the world, 26 years of age. Everyone expected Pavlik to knock Hopkins out, and Hopkins put on one of the greatest 40-year-old fighting performances of all time. Not just recently, we're talking about all time. For a 43-year-old to dominate Pavlik, who'd never lost before, he'd never been beaten. Hopkins won every single round, and Pavlik had absolutely no idea how to deal with the skilled veteran. And 43-year-old, that's a great performance, and he will be one of the Hall of Famers in the future.
Well, back to the Aussies, and Victor Chinian, arguably our best fighter at the moment, and arguably comes up with the best knockout of the year.
At a time when Australian boxing needed a big name Australian to really go out and conquer the world, Victor Chinian did that. In August, he won the IBF world title moving up. And then he fought Christian Majares, the great Mexican who was considered to be pound for pound number 7, the best in the world. He had 2 world titles. Vic had 1 world title. And Vic just destroyed him. From the opening round, he had him down on the canvas. It was one of the greatest performances of the year. I consider this to be my knockout of the year because Majares was considered to be the tough Mexican, steel chin, and Victor Chinian just walked through him like he wasn't even there. And Majares is only 27. This wasn't an old man that he was beating. He was beating a fighter in his prime. And
Americans love Darchinian. That's the most important thing because he's going to command the big bucks, isn't he?
He certainly is in $1 million fight now against Jorge Arce, the Mexican, in February. He's got an exciting style. You can see he comes and tries to knock you out with every single punch, and that's what you want to see. And this was the final knockout. You could see just taking Majares out, and that was a great win.
His hand speed is extraordinary, and the power in those punches for a small man is just
He's only 51 kilos. He's just incredible that he can do that for such a small guy. But
Don't pick on the little blokes.
Vic is a world-class fighter. He's our best fighter today, and you go away saying, when can I see him again?
Well, obviously, Vic Darchinian's great for Australian boxing. We had an incident not long ago that wasn't great for Australian boxing, and unfortunately, it involved 2 of the rising stars, Alamar and Kickett.
Ahmed Alamar, he absolutely took the fight to Willie Kickett. We started the year, we said Willie Kickett's going to be the next big thing of Australian boxing, and in the opening seconds he had Ahmed Alamar in a little bit of trouble here, and I thought Ahmed Alamar might go down himself, and all of a sudden you see him actually wind up here, and Willie Kickett, as he moves in for the kill, gets taken out with 1 knockout punch, and he was knocked out before he absolutely hit the canvas. And we saw, there it is there, and he goes down. He couldn't even get up.
But unfortunately, what it sparked was the ugly scenes that is all too common in boxing. Now, what's been the fallout from the riot which this caused in Australian fighting?
The first thing, I was there that night with Andy Raymond calling the fight for Fox Sports, and the first thing was the guys who were doing the worst things aren't part of Australian boxing. They're all the hangers-on. I didn't see guys that I know in Australian boxing doing the worst things. There was a review by the Australian Boxing Federation that's going to continue in March, but you see these scenes, we don't want an Australian.
Elamar's trainer, if I'm right, he went straight to Kickett as soon as he jumped. His corner was concerned about the opponent's welfare. And as you quite rightly say, Paul, it was the outsiders, the hangers-on who want to big note themselves. Those involved in the fight went straight to the man on the canvas.
Well, that was Billy Hussein, one of the best men in Australian boxing you ever meet. And look, the good people in Australian boxing were trying to just calm this thing down. Unfortunately, it got out of control, and that sort of news went around the world. Not good for Australian boxing, but a great win for Ahmed Alamar.
We're going to finish it up with the dream match before we have a look at your top 10 Aussies pound for pound. The Pac-Man took on the Golden Boy and the Pac-Man won.
Oscar De La Hoya and Manny Pacquiao, when they announced this fight, people said it's a mismatch. De La Hoya's too big, Manny Pacquiao's only small. He's moving up 2 weight classes. De La Hoya's moving down 1 weight class. You can see the size advantage here, but the little man, Manny Pacquiao, was too fast, too strong, and too tough for Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar had trouble, obviously, going down in weight. You can't do it in boxing, and that's a caution for Anthony Mundine. Mundine's trying to move down in weight now to middleweight. It's very hard for a fighter in his 30s to move down in weight, and you could see here Manny Pacquiao just dominated, and Oscar had to stop in his stool at the end of the 8th round, and that was the great win for Manny Pacquiao, who is today the best boxer in the world pound for pound.
The interesting thing about that is when you move up a division, you get a little bit more power, a little bit more strength, a little bit more confidence, and exactly the opposite happens when you drop down, doesn't it?
It's very hard. You've got to take that weight off. But people are saying big bad Oscar De La Hoya, he's going to beat up little Manny Pacquiao, but it just shows you. It doesn't matter the size. It's the fight in the boxer.
Well, if the Pac-Man's the best pound for pound in the world, take us through your top 10 in Australia.
Well, we've got Vic Darchinyan, who's clearly #1 fighter in Australia today, and he's dominating in the world. Anthony Mundine, there we see #2. Sakio Bika, who's got an IBO title. Marco Katsidis, we saw. Daniel Geale, I'd love to see more of Daniel Geale. He only fought twice last year. Lovemore Nadu is still the gatekeeper. Lenny Zappa, great young talent for the future. And then, of course, Billy Dibb, who lost a world title fight this year. And will he kick it? And Ahmed Elamar, we saw just recently. Will we get a rematch?
So no Hopper, no Solomon Amono.
They need a little bit more experience. And let's let them develop. Hamono and Hopewadi can do big things on the world scene. Let's give them 2 more years to see how they can develop, particularly over the next 12 months.
Where are they going to fight, though? Because they won't fight each other.
Yeah. There's plenty of opportunities out there. We've got 4 major world title belts out there. There's plenty of opportunities for them to move onto the world scene, and you will see Hopewadi and Hamono in big fights. Now, whether they can develop will determine whether they can take that next step up, that next level.
All right, it'll be interesting to see what 2009 brings. Paul, thanks very much for all your great comments throughout the year on Fox Sports News. We look forward to talking to you next year.
I think 2009 is going to be a big year for boxing once again.
You beauty.
Let's hope so. Now, Kevin McGee will join us after the break here on The Long Lunch, as sadly motor racing suffers yet another financial setback.
And cool heads save the Warriors in their 2020 clash against the Blues.